What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're going to be diving into another 2022 fantasy football mock draft here on Underdog Fantasy. We'll be drafting, as always, our 12-team half PPR format here. We're going to dive into the draft in just a second. I've already went ahead and entered it, but it has not filled yet. I'll see you guys when my pick position has been finalized, and we're about to kick that draft off. All right, here we go, everyone. We're going to be starting off today's draft, it looks like, with the 1.2 overall pick. We're all filled up here. The draft's about 30 seconds away, so you can scroll ahead to that point in time if you'd like. If not, it's only about 20 seconds now, so we'll be on the clock in no time. As always, I want to invite you guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about your fantasy leagues this season, I am here to help you, here to be a resource and a tool for you guys. So if you drop down, leave those questions in the comment section. I'll get back to you guys as soon as possible. Click that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you're never late for any content, and always have the opportunity to ask your questions as they come about. So thank you guys so much for being here with me today. I appreciate the heck out of all you guys. I will be drafting Christian McCaffrey here, kind of the most polarizing player at the top of draft boards this year. You will see him be drafted below guys like Cooper Kupp, whose ADP is the 3.3 overall pick. Of course, many of us have been burned, including myself, last season and the season prior. Of course, you know, for me, I probably get burned by every player in fantasy because with the amount of leagues I draft, I try to diversify myself. Even if I absolutely hate a player, I will draft at least one share of them across one of the leagues I draft that season. Christian McCaffrey has been a player, though, that every time we're stuck at this 1.2 pick, I will go ahead and draft him, though, just because I do think he still has the highest upside of any player at that running back position, just with his overall PPR value and what he brings to the table. So here we go. I'll pop up this draft screen. Actually, I'm going to start drafting off of my phone, realizing and remembering this much quicker than I did in the last episode. I just want to give you guys the opportunity to be able to see, and this throws a wrench in my plans. I'm logged out on my phone, you guys. Okay, I'll try and log in very, very quickly with this if possible. Use my Face ID there to get in. I want to have the draft board up for you guys so you can see who's going off the board. It is kind of tough to try and watch that, whatever you want to call it, kind of that toggling menu at the top. So if you see the board here, JT goes 1, CMC falls to us at number 2. It's basically a picture-perfect start based off of ADP for the first few picks until we get to that Jamar Chase spot at the 1.6 overall pick. Stephon Diggs at 1.7, Derrick Henry at 1.8. Actually, that might be exactly in line with how ADP goes. Najee Harris, I actually just prepped a video. He is the 110 pick. Wow. This is some textbook stuff here. Devontae and CD are actually second-round ADP players, though. So personally, if it was me, I would be drafting Derrick Henry above both Jamar and Stephon Diggs. I would probably even draft Najee Harris above Stephon, but after that, I'd probably take Stephon ahead of Dalvin Cook, and so on and so forth. DeAndre Swift, love that pick there. Love that start with CeeDee Lamb and CeeDee Lamb and DeAndre Swift at the 111 and 2.2. Very good start there. Wide receiver heavy on the back end here at the 112 and 2.1 with Devontae and Mike Evans. Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones getting themselves a nice RB stack there. Don't mind that RB stack with Joe Mixon, who I actually have on my big board rankings, my running back positional rankings. I do have and do favor Joe Mixon above Dalvin Cook there, but it works out because with ADP, you can kind of play the board here in the early phases of the draft. So I successfully got in on my phone here. We'll be drafting, looking at who's going to be coming up to us here with this next pick. Not always my favorite spot and position to start with here, but we'll see what ends up happening. It might be nice to pair Christian McCaffrey with a nice high floor player. Do I want to gamble on the fact that I can take Mark Andrews here and have a really, really good shot at a high ceiling tight end one? Or, you know what? With the nature of the running back position, you know, Leonard Fournette's guy's risk as well. I'm going to go Mark Andrews here. Don't love the pick, but I'm not confident he would have made it back to me there at the 211. I do have quite a few receivers here that I really, really like in this particular format. I might just go with Mike Williams here. T. Higgins would be my next player up on the board that I would take. But in this circumstance, CMCS is a risky running back. It's not, you know, my favorite outcome to start the draft here, having to take a risky player in CMC. But again, he does have that high upside. We're getting Mark Andrews, a guy, 8 picks after Travis Kelce went off the board that could easily finish as the RB1. Some tough choices here on the back end for the player with the 1.1 overall pick. Again, I am looking at T. Higgins because Lenny's off the board. There goes T. Higgins. If Mike Dubb is there, and he is, I will be taking him, who I do really like and think fits this team. Now, I didn't draft exactly according to my rankings there because at the end of the day, this is best ball. I'm playing for upside here. And essentially, Mike Williams has the type of ceiling that wins you fantasy weeks. He is the type of player that can go out there and just capture a performance, have a massive 30-point scoring game, and win you a fantasy week. So that was the thought process there. That's why we ended up going that direction with that pick. I think between him, CMC, and Mark Andrews, we get ourselves 3 guys who all have top potential at their positions in any given week. Mark Andrews, obviously, there's a small sample size of tight ends that are actually capable of finishing as the number 1 overall at that position group. CMC, as I stated when I drafted him, I think has the highest ceiling amongst running backs this year. Of course, that floor, I'll stop saying it because I'm beating a dead horse here, but the floor is very shaky because there is a lot of risk associated with a guy who's only played 10 games the last 2 years total. So hopefully Mike Dubb can be that kind of interesting ceiling player that is not going to make the lineup every week because he will have some stinker performances, but when he goes off, he absolutely crushes it, and being tied to Justin Herbert is a huge advantage for this team. So here we go, making our way through the 3rd round here. Will be coming back to me in the 4th and the top of the 5th round. So I'm thinking Allen Robinson off the top of my head, just knowing how ADP is going to play out here. He would be a very, very nice option for this team. A Jerry Jeudy might end up falling to me at that draft spot as well. What makes things tricky is knowing who the player on the bend behind me with back-to-back picks will choose to go and choose to build their team here. I'm probably not going to get both of those receivers. To be honest, I've kind of missed the flight of running backs that I like to invest in here. I just didn't really like the territory for some of those other players quite yet. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. I could have tried to address the running back position very heavily by going CMC and then Leonard Fournette on that bend, but I do see some, very easy holes that can be poked in Fournette's outlook for this season. At face value, he seems like that really nice workhorse running back 1. He was 3rd in red zone touches last year, 3rd in running back targets with 84 last year. Those things look great, but then you've got the training camp weight rumors. Yes, he cut 15 pounds, reportedly arrived at 245, which is cool, but they did bring in Rachaad White in the 3rd round, a player I really, really like, so I don't know, if his skill set is a bit more complete, if he doesn't have fumbling issues. Leonard Fournette was not supposed to be the workhorse running back for Tampa last year. They were supposed to be deploying kind of a 1-2 punch with Rojo on Leonard Fournette, but then Rojo fumbled himself into the doghouse. If Rachaad White doesn't do that, especially if Leonard's kind of already on the hot seat with his physicality, his weight, and his preparation for this season, that worries me a bit because I could easily see a player as talented as Rachaad White, a guy who excels in off-tackle runs, which is now the strength of this offensive line as they've lost yet another crucial interior offensive lineman. I didn't want to start my draft with 2 risky running backs and just kind of, try to compensate for a need on this team by compensating with a player who doesn't really fit that niche for this role. So, honestly, a Javonte Williams would have been a better fit had he fallen to me there because I think his floor is far higher and his ceiling can be elevated as well. We do have to make a pick here because we are on the clock. Cam Akers here is a guy who I think at this draft value has some really nice potential. Oh man, A-Rob and Jerry Jeudy went right. Yeah, okay. I think I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to go Cam Akers here. So to me, I think Cam Akers has a very similar outlook as a Leonard Fournette for this season. If I'm being entirely honest, they are separated by a handful of picks in my rankings. However, the draft discount I got in the late 4th, I feel a lot more comfortable, nearly 2 whole rounds later, going with this Cam Akers pick as opposed to that Leonard Fournette pick. Cam Akers is a guy who, of course, doesn't have a guaranteed RB1 finish in store this season, but he plays in an elite offense. He's very explosive, now a full season plus removed from that Achilles injury. obviously is super explosive in space, has a very high week-to-week fantasy ceiling, and should be the clear RB1 for this team this year. I think I got to go Deontay Johnson here. He is clearly my highest ranked receiver left on the table. It would start out a really nice balance for this team. It's kind of a nice floor pairing as well with a Mike Williams. So Mike Dubb's the guy who's going to get you those week winning or potentially kind of stinker games. Deontay Johnson's ceiling is absolutely nothing in comparison to what Mike Williams brings to the table. However, his target volume, 28.5% target share this past season, 169 targets, I believe. A guy who was #1 in route participation, #1 in routes run this past year. Absolute definition of a high volume player. Really love his route running capabilities. He brings a lot to the table for that Pittsburgh offense. And you can make the argument that their quarterback situation actually got better this offseason. It's not a lock that that's the case, but Big Ben was pretty putrid and pretty miserable in 2021, especially, that Tommy John injury for a guy who was already out of his prime, or at least getting close to the end of it there, really, brought about a situation that was not ideal. So I want to apologize to you guys if you're getting distracted by my chair. I'm sure it's probably acting up with the green screen. It hasn't liked it all week. I'm not in my typical recording studio. I will be back there next week, but currently I'm having to improv a little bit. So I actually noticed that when I lean back here, I guess I can see this back when I edit the video, but if I lean back, it seems like it starts to get a little bit better, but if I lean forward or as I come closer to the camera, it starts to kind of interfere with that green screen again. So I guess I can try and stay rocked back for you guys the rest of today's video. We'll see though. I guess we are just kind of laying back, having some fun here. Hopefully you guys are listening to this as you do something that you don't really want to be doing, whether that's cleaning, your house, doing some chores, whatever the case may be. Nothing better than listening to some good old Sizzle Fantasy Sports, playing some fantasy football, or at least preparing for your 2022 fantasy football drafts. Leave a like on today's video if you guys are getting excited for your leagues this year. I certainly am. I've drafted so many teams, and I just want to see my guys play this year, especially those guys I've got as my must-own players in the draft guide for this season. If you're looking to play leagues with me, you can absolutely do so. We've got an invite link in the description of today's video, and every video, actually, of any video you watch on the channel here, to our community Discord server. That's a free tool. You guys can hop in there, join, create fantasy leagues with other members of the community. I join almost all of the leagues, whether they're paid or free leagues. And I'm trying to fill some underdog leagues on there as well. If you guys use code SFS, you can get access to my website, sizzlefantasy.com, absolutely free. Again, that's code SFS. And again, I will join leagues with you guys because I appreciate the heck out of you. Of course, not only supporting me with my code usage, but just watching the videos here and playing fantasy, embracing the fantasy lifestyle that we all love to live. So we are, how many picks away? 8 picks away. We're up in 8 selections. Now it's 7 with that pick of Elijah Mitchell there. Not someone I love for fantasy this season. Would prefer to have 0 shares of him. I'm pretty sure that's the case right now, but wouldn't mind to enter the season with 0 as the official number. Possibly 1. I may own 1 share of Elijah Mitchell. Not totally sure on that one. So let's take a look at the board here, figure out exactly what my next move, my next strategy to implement may be here. I am noticing that as we approach the late 6th round, there goes one of the players I was just going to talk about, but Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts were pretty good values there. I've seen Kyler go in the late 5th round. Not something that would be super disappointing to me, or I really should rephrase that. Not something that is super, it's not a red flag to me per se. If he goes in the late 5th, I think that's fair draft territory. Jalen Hurts for me is a must-have player in any territory of the 6th round. You can get access to all of my must-have players or must-draft players rather at any point on the draft board in rounds 1 through 20 when you get website access on sizzlefantasy.com. Again, there's a link in the description for how you can get access to that stuff. Of course, one of those ways is through Underdog and code SFS. But here we are up on the clock here in a couple seconds. So where exactly do I want to go? To be quite honest, the perfect situation here for me would be to go Allen Lazard with my first pick, lock him in as my wide receiver 3. The reason I'm going to go with Allen Lazard is because I think that as an Aaron Rodgers pass catcher, he may be more highly touted than a guy like Drake London, who is the guy I would love to draft here with this second selection. So we're going to go Allen Lazard here, the Lizard King, with that first pick in the late 6th. It is definitely above ADP, but, you know, at this point, he's my guy. The draft position for me today is kind of awkward based off of the draft strategies I prefer to implement. It doesn't work out perfectly. He goes Adam Thielen, who was going to be kind of my backup here. I won't be super happy if he takes Drake London, which he did not. Give me some Drake London, baby. Our wide receiver 4. I'm going to pop this down and pay attention to bye weeks because I have not been doing so, which is not very smart of me. And, of course, we have drafted 2 wide receivers with week 14 buys in back-to-back selections. So not the end of the world. We'll be fine. Plenty of rounds to go here. Just wanted to keep an eye on that before I ended up getting too excitable here. Week 9 has really been my killer. I'm sure for those of you guys that have been drafting leagues this season, you found that week 9 is a very popular bye week, from the Browns to the 49ers to the Cowboys to the Broncos. There are a lot. I'm looking at my phone here trying to find out any more. The 49ers, I already said them. There is a lot of fantasy relevant players on bye those weeks, and that's the one that has definitely killed me the most across these formats. Today, so you'll be seeing this video on Tuesday. I'm recording this video on Monday. We got the news this morning about Desean Watson and his 6-game suspension ruled by the court judge. I am very interested to see the overall outcome of this team. So, sorry guys, I just had a brief moment where I was pondering something on the draft board here. What I was talking about, though, is I'm interested to see how the outcome for the Browns team eventually materializes here. You've got a situation where you've got a opportunity for Roger Goodell to kind of have a step-in veto power here, where he can essentially take that 6-game suspension and extend and elongate that. There's a lot of conversation in the football world, in the community right now, simply about the potential for a 8-game suspension, so extending it 2 games. I've heard 12 games tossed out there, and I've heard some that think it'll be an entire season. I know a lot of people are quite upset about the fact that guys like Zeke and Big Ben, Dan Snyder, who hasn't received any punishment, but Zeke and Big Ben especially received 6 games for 1 accusation. And you've got these 20+ here with Desean that resulted in the same disciplinary action for that team. So for me, I think that it becomes a matter of Goodell's opinion. You know, that's really what it's going to come down to here. The NFLPA does not want him to... they don't want him to appeal or change it, obviously, because they're going to take the side of the players every time. Man, Chase Edmonds goes out the board there. Unfortunate. But I think it's more likely than not that he does end up seeing an extension to his actual suspension timeline, and things don't exactly play out perfectly for him. So here we are coming up in the late 8th round. I would be very happy to land a Matt Stafford in the early 9th. The team in front of me on the bend already has Pat Mahomes. This team does not have a quarterback. If they're going to take one, I hope they take Dak Prescott, because I am, again, hoping to grab me a share of... Oh, wow. They go to Desean Watson. That is kind of ballsy, considering that we were just talking about the potential for him to actually see that suspension extended here. So we're on the clock. Dang it. I was going to go that direction, actually, and snatch me up a share of... I was going to snatch up a share of Sky Moore there, and things just didn't work out right. I'm not a huge Damien Harris fan right now. I haven't been all offseason. I've been very skeptical of that. I'm going to take Kareem Hunt here, kind of that goal line vulture of Nick Chubb. Again, I don't really like this 1-2 draft position. It's something that I found myself just not really feeling super satisfied with any of my picks here today. That's not true. It's not that I haven't felt satisfied with any of my picks. I just don't love the draft value per se that I'm getting here. Again, the reason I passed on quarterback here, things work out well for me, is I was expecting to get some value on Matt Stafford here at the top of the 9th round. Because they already had invested into Patrick Mahomes in the 5th round, I assumed they probably weren't going to take their second quarterback this early. So for me, Kareem Hunt playing the RB3 role works for this team. We're going to be in a bit of a sticky situation if CMC ends up getting nicked and then Cam Akers doesn't hit, because then really Kareem Hunt, his upside, I would say, is a middling RB2. Obviously, if something were to happen to Nick Chubb, that would produce more lineup value for him. He's going to see some goal line opportunities and some run, obviously, in the passing game for this offense, but it's not like he's a weekly lineup staple. I would much rather have, a guy like a Chase Edmonds or a Rashad Penny who went just, before we could really get a hold of him for this team. This 1-2 draft position just doesn't really promote having good RB depth. And at the end of the day, that's just something we're going to have to live with here. Hindsight, maybe I would have drafted James Conner in the early 3rd round. His ADP is the 3.9, so it would have been a significant reach. But I honestly feel better about the positional upside we got with Mike Williams at that territory as opposed to had we reached up that far. Let's see here. So we are up in 13 picks. And of course, though, there goes Kenneth Walker. He was down there on the draft board, and I was eyeing him up. And that's interesting. Is that the fantasy flock in our video today? Potentially. James Cook here he ain't making his way back. No shot. So I would really like to start playing for some RB depth, but of course we're going to continue addressing positional upside whenever it comes across to us. I believe we have addressed every position today, at least at a foundational level. Yes, we have. So, of course, position filling is not something that I recommend or advocate for here in fantasy football. However, there is kind of a point in time where the drop-off for every position kind of hits its maximum, and especially the QB spot in terms of QB1s, we were getting right towards the end of that list there. Absolute worst case scenario, if you were going to go super freaking light at QB, I would say like Kirk Cousins is the last guy I would feel comfortable with as my top tier quarterback. Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers are right on that cusp as well. But we just addressed Matthew Stafford in the early 9th round. So here go more RBs flying themselves off the board. There goes Damien Pierce in the 10th round, about a round or so ahead of his typical ADP. Devin Singletary, someone who I stay away from like the Black Plague, is still there on the table. James Cook. If you guys actually want to see me drop down this draft board more frequently, let me know so that I can do that for you. Because currently I'm just looking at the available players on my phone and reciting ADPs, stats, all that great stuff off the top of my head. So if you guys want to see me drop this down so you can see best players available every once in a while here on the left-hand side of the screen, please feel free to let me know. But I can do that here. I'll drop it down for a second when it's my turn to pick, and then I'll put the board back up. I just want to make sure you guys can see the overall big picture of what exactly is happening today. So Alexander Madison, the 10th round pick, I definitely do not love. He happened to invest in a Dalvin Cook, though. All right, a little bit more understandable. He's a pricey backup is essentially what you're investing into. In the best ball format where Dalvin Cook has never played more than 14 games in a single season, though, it's somewhat understandable. You could be looking at a situation where Madison is seeing a bit more run in those weeks where Dalvin is not in the lineup, and he is kind of a discount Dalvin Cook. He does a lot of things similar, not nearly as explosive, but can definitely hold down the fort for that team. Let's see, who else is on the board? I mean, maybe I would have rather went with a James Cook, a guy who has some standalone value. Now there's stupid reports coming out about potentially Zach Moss having his own legitimate role in that offense, which to me is almost laughable. We're going to be up here in about 5 seconds. No idea where I want to go with this pick, to be entirely honest. This is the late 10th round. Might just be Christian Watson territory for me. And then maybe I take a guy like Rojo. yeah, we're going to go Christian Watson and get another share of that Packers wide receiver room. Don't love having both guys. But for me, Aaron Rodgers has to throw the football to somebody. So I will take advantage of that opportunity there. It's very unlikely that him and Alan Lazard coexist at the same time, and we did just get our third week 14 by wide receiver, but there's, of course, at wide receiver, plenty of opportunities to address that position room there. I think I'm going to go, man, this is a tough decision. I can either go Rojo and bet against the guys in Kansas City that I'm always bashing on, CEH. I think Rojo's got some legit opportunity to have some goal line usage here. Or I could lock up a very high-end handcuff in Isaiah Spiller. And at the end of the day, I think we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm very split on Ronald Jones because of how poor he is as a pass catcher. I see the the value in standard leagues as a guy who can get rushing touchdown production, and a guy who can potentially give you some of that goal line and short yard situational work. Maybe he's the guy that gets the opportunity as the first and second down rusher as well, outside of passing down situations with Jerick McKinnon. There's opportunity for that to be at play. But again, he is a very, very poor pass catcher. He fumbled his way into the doghouse with Tampa Bay. That Kansas City backfield is kind of a mess right now. Again, I think it's somewhat cut and dry how to predict exactly how that's going to play out and exactly what's going to happen here. But definitely something that could just have a lot of variables and be very confusing at the same time. It seems simple. It seems like, CEH is a smaller running back. They haven't shown a willingness to give him consistent goal line opportunities early in his career. He hasn't been a guy that has been excessively involved in short yardage situations and as a rushing threat. He hasn't been as involved as much as a pass catcher as we may have expected or hoped for to this point in his career. And then you bring in Jerick McKinney, who kind of eats into some of the things that he does well. Julio Jones, interesting pick there at the 11-8. I'm really paying attention to how his ADP is currently adjusting to what we're seeing from the Tampa Bay move. It is interesting to see him kind of vault up here into the 11th round. Honestly, I don't mind it. I'd probably pick him above a guy, really good back up there in the late 11th round, Kirk Cousins, who we talked about a bit earlier. Haven't seen too much quarterback drafting here. It's been kind of sparse the last couple rounds. But anyways, Tim Patrick's a guy I wouldn't mind drafting Julio over. Even Michael Gallup maybe. Not to throw shade at Tim Patrick, who last season was a very, very viable flex player with a high floor in weekly lineups for a stretch. He's just a playmaker, but as potentially, if KJ Hamler comes back and beats him out, maybe that's not even the case. Maybe he does remain as the third receiver in that Broncos offense, but it is the third receiver spot for Denver. Kind of the same role Julio's playing, though, in Tampa Bay. Michael Gallup, for me, the only reason would be simply the fact that, he said it himself, it's not necessarily the most realistic expectation that you see him playing week one. It's just something that is probably unlikely to be the case here. So the one thing that I think I may like with this draft pick position is that I should get an opportunity to draft one of the two receivers that I really like in that late 12th, early 13th round territory. Those players, of course, being Jalen Tolbert, who, unless I'm totally blind here, I just saw on the board. But his ADP looks like it is actually climbing right now as I see him creeping up to the top of that board. And potentially a guy like Jahan Dotson or Josh Palmer could be in play here as well. For me, I might want to address running back a couple more times just because of the risk that our board has had kind of play out here just with how today's video has went with the players available. But I could see myself drafting a Nyheim Hines, a Tyler Algier here coming up to try and get some more upside in players who are capable of producing for this team. So, see what happens. Rachaad White finally goes off the board there. Not somebody, again, who I'm super into drafting this season. Mike Gesicki, Don't love that pick at all. If you guys have been paying attention to some things that kind of came out of camp, Mike McDaniel was like, yeah, we haven't really been throwing Mike Gesicki the ball much in camp. So I'm going to be a bit skeptical on his breakout this year. Rojo goes out the board kind of as expected. Darrell Henderson actually might be a really nice option at play here. I don't want to miss out on Jalen Tolbert here to get a different bye week, a unique player, and I'm on the clock here. I will go ahead and take Jalen Tolbert at this spot. A little bit ahead of ADP. He is actually the next best player available, though, according to ADP. If Darrell Henderson is available with this next pick, I will draft him as that handcuff to Cam Akers, who I think that, when given his spots last season, Henderson was very, very productive. He showed the competence and ability to have a really nice role for this team. And I don't typically draft Darrell, but in the fact that I actually snatched Cam Akers in this draft, I don't mind doing so whatsoever, especially in a best ball league. It's a guarantee. If Akers goes down or is struggling and he gets put on the bench, Henderson's the next guy in line with Michelle out of town here that is going to get those touches. So again, last season Henderson was really a fringe RB1 while he was healthy before he got banged up, showing us he was very capable of producing lineup points. He's no Cam Akers. He doesn't have that same level of athletic ability or explosiveness that Cam Akers has, but someone definitely able and capable of being a lineup level producer. So this team could play out really well. You never know. If CMC ends up staying healthy and ends up having a really nice season, obviously 29.3 fantasy points per game in 2019. It's been a while. I kind of said this in a video earlier today. This is the second episode that you guys should be seeing tomorrow, but I kind of talked about once a running back takes a step backward, it's really unlikely to see him turn around and take that same amount of steps back forward. So what I'm kind of hoping for, and I actually calculated this out, it was kind of ridiculous. If CMC scored 75% of his output from 2019, he would have had the same season that Jonathan Taylor had here in 2021. If you weren't aware, JT had kind of a weak RB1 finish at 21.5 fantasy points per game or somewhere roughly in that marker. And again, CMC was like almost 8 points higher than that at 29.3 fantasy points per game. So, again, about 75% of that production would have been JT's RB1 finish from this past year. So kind of some fun stuff to talk through and think about there. But at the end of the day, I do think that he does have the potential to go north of 20 points per game in fantasy scoring here. He should still be the central and focal point of that offense. And I think he can do a lot of nice things. Van Jefferson still being on the board in the 14th round is a bit surprising to me. No chance Tyron Davis-Price makes it back to me, but one can dream here. Van won't make it back to me either. Those are kind of the next two best players available. Other than that, not really loving too many of the guys at ADP on the board. So it's going to turn into be, just kind of reaching and drafting my guys, if you will. Marlon Mack, someone I'll keep my eye on here in the later part of this round, is just someone that can kind of hold down that fort for a point in time. I do think it's inevitable that at some point you're going to see a guy like Damien Pierce take over that backfield and really start to dominate things there. But early in the season, if I need that production, if Cam Akers is sputtering and still hasn't necessarily found himself, there is some analysis from doctors that it might take another 4 to 6 weeks of football action for him to get fully acclimated and to be 100% of himself. So there he goes at the 14, or excuse me, we were talking about Cam Akers. So back to Tyron Davis-Price. There he goes at the 14.5. Marlon Mack's still there. We'll see. We will see. We shall see. A lot of tight ends are left on the table. I wouldn't mind grabbing my second tight end here. I might dabble in the David Njoku market. He has a week 9 bye. What bye is Baltimore? I want to say 11. 10. Baltimore has a week 10 bye. I'll make this pick on screen here for you guys, and holy cow, I'm way behind. Didn't mean to pull up the news there. There we go. We'll snatch up some David Njoku here, possibly, week 9. So if Watson gets suspended 8 games, now I'm gonna actually go down here, take Marlon Mack. I'm not giving the team on the bend 2 picks to take my guy away. But if Desean gets suspended 8 games, Cleveland enters into a week 9 bye. Week 10 could be the first time, that being the first game without Mark Andrews for this lineup that we see Njoku and Watson play together. And Watson has had some nice flashes with some pretty bad tight ends in Houston, so that would be something fun to obviously keep an eye on there. Higbee goes at the 14-12. No chance he takes another tight end here. So it looks like we're going to get our guy, at least in terms of this round. Paris Campbell, seeing his ADP kind of rocket up after a lot of reports have surfaced about him being kind of the clear number 2 option in Indianapolis. Now the report did come with saying trust nothing, because Paris Campbell has been the epitome of all hype and absolutely nothing delivered, because I fill out injury histories for all of those 300 player profiles on my sizzlefantasy.com draft guides, and Paris Campbell's is absolutely riddled. Oops, dropped my pen there. Absolutely riddled with just not fun things. Broken foot. Was it ACL last season? Lots of unideal things took place in his situation last season, or throughout the past few seasons since he's been drafted. Obviously, his athletic profile in terms of just his ability to be an explosive player and be Jamison Williams just kind of caught me off guard here, falling all the way down to the 13-7 draft position. Some really nice value on him there. His ADP is definitely taking a little slip off the slope here. All fine and dandy, though. Just gives me a better opportunity to let him fall into my lap later on. I've been loving him in the 12th round, but I will definitely take him in the late 13th or the second half of the 13th round if that comes. But back to Paris Campbell, it's been little to no guaranteed success. It's all been about projection. Been having a tough time with those 2 words today for some reason. Hayden Hurst goes at the 15-8. Nice potential upside there with our good friend Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I actually think it is an upgrade over CJ Uzomah. Uzomah is a nice player, but I think that Hayden Hurst is maybe a more polished receiving threat. Not necessarily a great red zone player, which is something that you obviously love to project for tight ends, just having that bigger size and frame, and that potential ability to be used in the inside 20-yard line territory. Hayden Hurst really isn't that guy for me. Again, of course, he's a big target because he is a tight end, but to me, it's a lot more about his athleticism, his route running, and his ability to just kind of break away from the defense after the catch is why I think he's really nice for the situation, especially as kind of that middle of the field safety blanket. If he can separate underneath and then take off and make some good yardage after the catch, that's something that's really interesting. I keep yawning here. Wake me up, you guys. Taysom Hill at the 15-12 is quite the interesting pick there. It's odd how they line. Okay, here's my thing. I'm not sure how Underdog handled this in 2020 when he was playing quarterback amongst other positions. But what happens now when we're just putting him in this niche tight end category and then Jameis gets hurt? Do they just convert him to quarterback? You're rostering an extra quarterback every week? I think that part of, that blurred line here kind of gets a little bit trippy when you're talking about best ball, because it can really make or break someone's team based on their expectation and obviously willingness to draft him. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. I hope Jameis starts the whole season, though. I think that Saints offensive situation is a very interesting one to break down. Michael Thomas coming back and practicing, obviously, in its own is a very interesting storyline. And then you add in the fact that you've got a situation where you've got Chris Olave, an actual legitimate deep threat. Jarvis Landry, another veteran possession receiver for underneath. They've got some nice things to work with there. Obviously, Alvin Kamara to work that flank role out of the backfield and beat defenders to the sideline. that should be highly effective. I think Jameis has a really good situation set up for himself. They've got some good offensive linemen. They did lose Teron Armstead, but they still have Ryan Ramczyk, obviously at the right tackle position. Adam Troutman, I suppose. There's probably some Adam Troutman truthers tuning in today. I am definitely not an Adam Troutman hater, but I do have I do have some realistic and reasonable expectations for what he can be. I would say I'm definitely not a Cole Kmet truther either, but I am someone that does see the upside, and I have reason to be optimistic in that situation. It might just be Jared Goff time here again, making sure that the bye weeks. Wow, we're struggling today. Make sure the bye weeks don't overlap. They do not. We are getting ourselves a good old share of Jared Goff with a week 6 bye to pair alongside our Matthew Stafford share with a week 7 bye. The reason that I like going in that direction is plain and simple. I appreciate having a quarterback who I think is a elite ball distributor. If you've listened to, it's probably my most recent mock draft maybe, I kind of talked through the Rams versus Patriots Super Bowl. Wow, Romeo Dubs is seeing his ADP just freaking rocket up here. Man, do I want to draft a share of... What is this? Oh, this is the 17th round. All right, we're going for it here. I'm going to just reach for the stars. I'm going to pick me some Sony Michel here. The wide receiver position right now is not something that is... There's a lot more receivers I'd feel comfortable taking at this spot as opposed to running backs. Let's just say that. I think Sony Michel's got some nice utility in this Dolphins backfield. I think he's the clear goal line back here. I think Chase Edmonds, if he were to get injured, Raheem Mostert is in his, age 30 season here. I think there's a very realistic shot that Sony Michel gets some weeks to himself as the lead guy in that backfield next season. And to be honest, Will Fuller still not being on a team. I don't mind drafting shares of A.J. Green. Sammy Watkins will be my guy, but I've kind of overplayed my hand here with Green Bay. I definitely can't draft a third Packers receiver. That just would not play out well. So I wanted to avoid doing that. Oh, and then the other thing I was contemplating was Carson Wentz. I wouldn't mind drafting a third quarterback today, especially if Wentz is there. He will probably be gone by the time he gets back to me, but you never know what'll happen here. Michel, though, is kind of the last guy of that running back group that I have any usage for, and being at this draft position, again, with how awkward we've talked about it being all day here, I wasn't going to leave it to chance that he's going to fall down to the second to last pick in this draft. That just was not going to happen. So I was also considering Terrace Marshall, who I really like. But I also have to kind of be real with myself here. I don't have very high expectations for Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold, regardless of who is classified as the team starter opening up this season. I think that they both have their flaws. I think that Baker's floor is a little bit higher, but he's been making some pretty goofy passes there. There was a bad interception on an underthrown ball last week when he first got to camp his first day there, when everyone was chanting, Baker, Baker. And then there was another one. I don't know what the setting was, but they were like practicing in the Carolina Panthers, their actual stadium, I believe. If not, it's a really freaking nice big practice field. I didn't look at the clip that closely, but I saw it a couple times. And he's under pressure, and he just yucks the ball. Okay, Jordan Love just went at the 18-12. I would be astounded to see him get some run this season. I made the poor choice of deciding to stream him last year against Kansas City. That didn't end up too well. I kind of let my Packers fandom get the best of me there. But what was I talking about? Oh, Baker. So he gets under pressure, and he just yaks his ball to the. It's like a. It almost looked like he was trying to throw a running back screen, but like that's also not what was happening. And he just shovel passed it over straight into the defensive lineman, who ended up intercepting the ball. There was no receiver in the area. It was quite the occurrence. So poor Baker, kind of bullying him there, but it's kind of fun to make fun of Baker Mayfield, to be honest, just because of all those. I mean, the progressive commercials were just one thing, and then honestly, I just don't like watching Baker. It's kind of annoying. Anyways, though, so the whole point of that was to say that I love Terrace Marshall, but I think his situation is totally buns. Carson Wentz is still there, man. You've got two elite deep threats, or at least prospective elite deep threats, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. You've got some nice opportunities to work with McKissick and Gibson out of the backfield. I don't hate that situation there if I want to draft my third QB. This is a very light receiver draft today. Again, I wouldn't mind drafting Romeo Doubs, but I do have, and there he goes, I do already have two Packers wideouts, so I just can't bring myself to do that. Let's see. Will they make the decision for me, or will I have the opportunity to make the choice for myself in terms of Marshall or Carson Wentz here? The suspense is killing me. Pick 215, our final of the day, will be, wow, all right. To heck with it. Let's go Carson Wentz here. Yep, he doesn't overlap with either of those other two QBs. There we go. Carson Wentz should deliver us some decent ceiling performances here for this season. We did end up going a little bit more running back heavy today than I would have liked. We're going to pop out into the post-draft screen here in just a second to do our recap for today's video. As I said, this wasn't my favorite draft today. We did have to go a bit more running back heavy because I did feel that our first pick kind of put us in a situation. Wow, 2,803 projected points seems a bit, what's the word? Hopeful. I mean, for this team, it's probably because I drafted a third quarterback. Typically, I don't do that. For as much as I've loved other teams that end up having like some of the lowest projected totals of any team in any league, that's quite funny to me here. But essentially here, the situation at play is that Christian McCaffrey, with our first overall pick, a guy, again, who's played 10 games in the last 2 years, I felt I had to address that position room with honestly guys that just have salvageable point production potential. It's not even that I love these guys as league-winning picks. To be honest, that's not the case. I didn't feel the luxury of being able to make some of those moves in today's video just because of how things played out here. At the end of the day, we ended up going 3 QBs with Stafford, Goff, and Wentz. I would hope Stafford's in our lineup for the majority of the games, but Jared Goff and Carson Wentz give us some really nice ceiling potential. And I think that, like I was saying when I drafted Jared Goff, all I got to do is hope that he can get the ball in space to his playmakers and have them deliver run after catch. You've got Hawkinson in the red zone. You've got him as a safety blanket as well. DeAndre Swift as a flank option out of the backfield can be a super, super productive player in that phase of things. Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. The one common denominator that Detroit has is all of their pass catchers are good after the catch. Even guys like Khalif Raymond, for God's sake, Josh Reynolds are decent players that can do some stuff. Carson Wentz has a big arm. He's a little bit erratic. He'll make mistakes. Hopefully shouldn't be in our lineup all that much. But ultimately, I think that the 2 vertical weapons he's got as his 1 and 2 receivers are very, very nice players. Our running back room, Christian McCaffrey, obviously, really, if I'm being entirely honest here, Christian McCaffrey is kind of going to teeter this whole team. If CMC doesn't work out, this team will not work out. If CMC works out, this team could work out. And at the end of the day, his health is going to really be kind of the make or break factor for this team. And what sucks about Christian McCaffrey this season is he doesn't really have a true backup. If you ask me, and especially for best ball and redraft formats, you can address this via waiver wire. But since we don't have waivers here in best ball formats, that's not a luxury that I'm able to experience here. What I mean by that is they brought in Deontay Foreman from Tennessee, who backed up Derrick Henry during his foot injury last season. And I think that, to be honest, he may just make Chuba Hubbard obsolete. Chuba Hubbard has stone hands. Chuba Hubbard does not break tackles very well. And even though he may be slated as the team's current top reserve option, I think CMC it's make or break. It's do or die here. I think that he has to be out there on the field because those 2 players will eat into each other's situational use here. I think Deontay Foreman, if CMC were to go down, of those 2 handcuff options, is clearly the guy that sees the goal line work. He's just a huge presence out there. But he's really not an amazing pass catcher either. So you're kind of missing something with both those two names there. Cam Akers here. I will say if Akers and CMC hit on their upside, I very well could win this league based off of the fact that I could have two top 5 players here. Cam Akers last season was someone I absolutely loved. He plays for an elite offense. This team is very balanced. Sean McVay's, 11 personnel and 12 personnel looks to run their zone blocking scheme is phenomenal. I absolutely love their offense. We'll see how the NFL game adjusts to them this season. That'll ultimately be a big part of how effective that run game is. But last year, I felt they were too pass dependent at times, especially when it came down to Sony Michel being the lead back for this team. There were stretches where I felt they didn't run the ball enough. Hopefully a healthy Cam Akers with his explosiveness, his athleticism, behind a still fairly good offensive line. They did lose Big Whit, Andrew Whitworth, but I'm hoping for some good things there. Kareem Hunt, kind of my expectation there, is that he can be kind of that high-level backup to a Nick Chubb, who, again, kind of saw his value take a hit today. Whether or not we want to talk about it, I mean, the Desean Watson situation does have spillover effects into Cleveland's offense. And at the end of the day, if Jacoby Brissett can't sustain long drives and get this team in the red zone, that's going to be a huge negative for both of those players. So, say what you will about Baker Mayfield. Again, I've spread my fair share of Baker hate today. He was at least competent of managing this offense to get the ball downfield when healthy. Let's put that asterisk there. But Hunt needs those working opportunities. He needs a quarterback who will throw the ball out of the backfield. He needs a quarterback who, again, can get them in goal line situations because they will kind of split those carries down there in that nitty-gritty, tight yardage situational role. Isaiah Spiller is really just a handcuff for Austin Eckler, a guy who was in a high-producing offense. Darrell Henderson, just a handcuff to Cam Akers. Marlon Mack, just an early season RB producer in case Cam Akers isn't doing so hot or something of that situation there. And then Sony Michel is just kind of my one dart throw, my one upside pick for today that I think could really outproduce his draft price. The receiver room is where things could arguably be a bit shaky. We do have 3 rookies of our 6 players at that spot. Mike Dubb, Deontay Johnson, Allen Lazard. Mike Dubb is a guy who can win my week. Any given contest, any given Sunday, can walk out there and score me 30 fantasy points. But he could also put up 3, and then you're left with the rest of this room to try and compensate for that loss and try and overcome that while starting potentially 3 receivers every game and needing to fill a flex spot every week as well. So that could become problematic if that consistency doesn't arise, if Allen Lazard doesn't deliver every week, if Deontay Johnson struggles and has some drop-off this season, if Christian Watson doesn't break out, if Jalen Tolbert struggles early in the year. Some things I've talked about in previous videos. Drake London, though, I do think will be a really, really sharp pick for us eventually. And then Mark Andrews and David Njoku. I mean, if there's really one area I set myself apart from the pack, I do hope it's that tight end position with Mark Andrews, the defending tight end 1. Leaving Hollywood Brown out of this situation obviously brings about the opportunity for more looks to Bateman and maybe even some more looks to Mark Andrews than he saw last year. Touchdown production, just target share in that offense, it's all there. So hopefully things work out well in our favor in that realm of things. So there we go. That was our draft recap for today. A bit of a longer draft. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe to the SFS channel here. I appreciate the heck out of all you guys. Again, code SFS to play on Underdog with me the rest of the summer here and during the fantasy season as well. I'll join, week-specific contests with you guys, play all kinds of fun stuff, and get you guys set up with those draft guides when you use the promo code. Otherwise, check out sizzlefantasy.com and check out some of our other pricing formats on there. So thank you so much, you guys. I'll see you in tomorrow's videos. Peace out.